the best champions to pair with Inquisitor Shamael for the Hydra clan boss, being as it's such a popular strategy at the moment, and a lot of players are saying, can I use this champion, can I use that champion? So I'm going to be going through every single champion you can use, who are the best, who are kind of okay, because I've seen some conflicting information out there, and I want to make sure you guys are maximizing all of your teams, because you can only use your champions once. So timestamps below. As always, let's get right into it. Alright guys, we're going to start out with the first faction to see if we have anybody here that can be the leader aura. If you're not sure with how Inquisitor Shamael's team works, I did a video on it, showed you my brutal key for 42 million damage or so. Nothing crazy, nightmare key should be a lot better using my more meta champions, but the leader slot with Inquisitor Shamael at the moment is gaining tons of turn meter. So what champion can you use? First answer, Raglan's going to be perfectly fine here. She has a turn meter boost on her A1 that applies to everyone else. She has a AoE heal, which can be very strong if you want to push against the red Head of Wrath if you want to fight her. She also has a strong defense-based aura for all enemies. Even though she isn't an AoE champion, she is going to attack the target and hit it for basically no damage really hard. She has the heal, revive, just in case you get in trouble. So she is a viable option here. Now, mostly we're going to be talking about AoE champions in this. I'm not going to get into a lot of the rares too much, because as we get in the higher difficulties, rares are going to have a very hard time surviving in those situations. Next, we will move on to High Elf to see if we have any champions here that can have potential here. Yannica is an interesting champion. The fact that she gives herself Perfect Veil kind of nullifies her from getting Fear. So while she is going to A1 if she's under a Veil buff, if she's under Perfect Veil, she's not going to be triggering Inquisitor Shamael's passive here, making her not the best option for a leader aura and champion overall for this position here. Someone like Battle Sage, she does have increased speed in all battles. You're not going to be worried about speed too much, but she does have increased attack that's going to be very strong. She can remove debuffs from your team. The Head of Mischief cannot steal her increased attack. She also has Revive on Death that she puts on one enemy for 3 turns, and she has an AoE on the A1, so she's going to be viable. However, once again, not the best champion for that role overall. Moving on to the Sacred Order faction, what do we have here? You can use Venus if you would like. She has poisons. She can fill up the debuff bar so you're not getting defense down there. She has an AoE HP burn, which can be very strong here. If you pair her with Cupidus, this is insanely strong. And of course, she also has that defense down and weaken ability you can use to your advantage if she is in that leader slot. Cupidus, of course, has increased attack in all battles. Complete dominating champion as far as how much damage he does. He has the HP burn that's random on 3 hits. He does have this awesome increased attack ability. I wouldn't use this against the main boss. I would kind of just stick with the A1 that's going to do tons of damage as it is, but he's also a very strong champion in every other role as well. Cardial, very strong champion here. We have a single hit A1 with the heal as well. We have remove all buffs, block debuff, revive on death. We have increased crit rate, increased damage, and an ally attack. Here's the key, then teams up with all allies to attack a target enemy. If you look at other champions, it's limited to the ally attack champion plus 3 champions, the ally attack plus 4 champions. That's really good for a 4 or 5 man team. However, I think they should kind of update the ally attack champions for the Hydra, since we can now use 6 champions. To my knowledge, Cardiel and Farrakhan the Fat are the only 2 champions that include all allies when using this ability here for an ally attack. On top of that, he also does have the aura of increased speed, but once again, you don't really need speed for any type of battle in this circumstance here. So that is going to cover it for the Sacred Order faction. Moving on to Barbarians here, we do have one champion that I mentioned already, which is going to be, where is he? Farrakhan the Fat. He's very good. He also has an ally attack. It's not all champions, but he does have the HP burn as well as poison and a defense down on the A1. Optimally, once again, he's not going to be one of the better ones, but he is worth mentioning overall. You could use Sky Touch Shaman if you wanted to, but she's not going to be close to the best. She's probably one of the worst ones, because this champion and any champion that boosts their turn meter, it's okay. I guess you have Revive on Death and block debuffs, but that doesn't really matter because you're not going to be taking a lot of damage with this certain team comp using Inquisitor Shamael. So now that we've gone over the Barbarians, let's move on to Ogryn Tribes, seeing if we have anyone that can be viable. You could use Biggin. I probably wouldn't recommend it. He's a better champion in not the leader slot for this champion, but he is definitely a very good champion overall if you want to throw him outside of the leader slot for sure. Someone like a Shatterbones can help your team. He has increased attack buff on all champions for 1 turn if it's a crit, and you should have him crit capped. This doesn't matter, but it is an AoE triple hit here, so that's very nice. On top of that, he does have decreased speed and fills the turn meter of all allies. Once again, decreased speed's okay, but you don't really need it because you're not going to get outsped if you do follow the strategies in place, and you really don't want to be filling your allies' turn meters because most of them are there for their A1 ability only, and if they're getting a turn, that means the Hydra's turn meters are going up more than they should be based on how the strategy works, so definitely keep that in mind when considering to use other champions. Outside of that, let's move on now to Lizardmen. Do we have any viable Lizardmen? Krisk, very strong option here. He has an AoE on the A1 ability with decreased speed. He has ally protection, continuous heals, increased defense, and increased speed for the whole team. Once again, the same thing applies. His best use is going to be for that AoE A1 ability for sure. We do have Basilisk here coming in strong as an attack-based Lizardman. He's an epic as well. Attacks all enemy places at 25% increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns. If this attack is critical, that part doesn't matter too much, but the A1 is going to help lots and lots of players. Also, if you're testing teams, this guy might not be a bad guy to throw in there just in case you mess up and you weren't able to hit end key fast enough. He is going to revive himself when killed and place block damage on him for 1 turn as well, so you can then hit that pause button and refresh safely. The next faction we're going to go over is Skinwalkers. What do we have here? You can use Coronar. He does have an AoE on his A1 ability. He also provides block debuffs and increased defense on this champion, not going to matter too much, but defense down and decrease attack could help you for sustain, but you won't be taking too much damage there, so it's up to you guys whether you want to use this or not for sure. And that is going to conclude it for the Skinwalker faction. Moving on to Orcs now, let's see, what do we have? What do we have here? As far as the legendary pool, there isn't going to be much. You can use Kreela for an ally attack champion. She also applies increased attack, increased crit rate, which can help you out for gearing. The shield thing could help for survivability on the A1, but not really. You really want that AoE ability here. Moving on to the epic champions, do we have anything good we can use? It really doesn't look like it from what I can see, so we are going to move on to the next faction. Moving on to Demonspawn, what do we have? Prince Kymar, great champion, not in the leader role, but he can be a very strong champion. Has an AoE here that has a chance to poison, has another AoE that can remove buffs. This will suffer from weak hits, so keep that in mind for sure. The aura doesn't matter. The A3 is going to be hit or miss. It's a very long cooldown, so you could potentially use him in the leader role slot to cycle through some important cooldowns from your other champions. But like I said, you really don't want all of your champions taking too many turns here. Now, one champion that still has to be tested, I did get the idea and HG Senti first brought it up. Now, we both used the champion Kutroxa, but we used it in different ways. One thing to note is Kutroxa has a 4-hit on her A1, so it's going to proc Inquisitor Shamael 4 separate times. I was building her for pure damage. He was building her with no damage at all. I'm not really sure which strategy is going to be best. Both of them can definitely be viable. One incredible part of her kit, if you wanted to use her as leader, is on top of her increasing attack in all battles by 24%, she is an A2 with an extra turn. What does that mean? That means you can target a separate head, place a weaken on it with a 100% chance, remove 2 random buffs since you're going to be building accuracy for that weaken, then go ahead and A1 the main torment target you are going to, and it's going to incredibly boost her turn meter, giving you no speed issues at all, even though, like I mentioned, you're really not going to be running into any as it is, because in the video I did show, I think I was running my champion without a speed aura without a Relentless set, which is another point I will talk about shortly, at 170 speed, and he was fine. Granted, he did have decreased speed up, but I was never in any trouble of getting cut off by any of the bosses on the brutal difficulty. So if that speed was fine with decreased speed on brutal, moving up to 200 speed without decreased speed, or 170 speed on its own for the other difficulties is going to be perfectly fine. Let's talk about the ideal gear sets for your champion in the leader role spot of an Inquisitor Shamael team. Now, the ideal gear set is going to be Relentless gear. Why Relentless gear? Because when it procs, it halts the turn meter of everything happening on the field. This is really strong because it doesn't let you increase the turn meter without breaking it down too specifically for numbers. That's going to make everyone's head explode. The turn meter is like 1,300. Let's just pick that number. It's not accurate, but it's kind of close. 1,300 is a turn meter, so think about having 300 speed. That leaves lots of room to hit true speed. So the fact that your leader is getting constantly boosted throughout the fight, every time a turn happens, the Hydra's turn meter starts ticking forward like this. So even though everyone's going to kill the Head of Torment way before the turn meter reaches anywhere near the thousands, is always going to be creeping up from whatever their base speed was, and that's the gap you're going to have to fill as you keep moving on to make sure they're not getting turns and your champion is consistently getting turns. The exception to that is going to be Relentless, getting that extra turn, halting everything in its spot, and then once the extra turn is done, that's when things resume again, unless you can refill it all the way back up in that time of the extra turn with counterattacks with the deterrence proc. I know it might sound a little confusing, but easy answer here is going to be extra turn champions, and Relentless gear is going to be ideal on that leader aura champion. Now, since we got a little bit sidetracked, let's move on to the epics to see what we do have here. Padma is a great champion. She has a double hit attack down on all enemies, which can be strong for survivability. She's an AoE decrease accuracy, which you probably won't need for this team, but if you do run into some type of trouble, the A3 can come in clutch. I know it has for me many times, removing all buffs if the Head of Mischief steals it and puts it on a target, or if the Head of Wrath comes out, applies that reflect damage and block buffs. This will get rid of that very, very quickly. Outside of that, you can also use the champion Nazana here from the Demonspawn epic HP based champion. You're not really going to care about her A2 at all unless you need survivability for some incoming hit. You do have attack down as an AoE, and you also have an AoE in the A1 slots, which is going to be an awesome champion to kind of throw into the mix here for sure. And as far as the Demonspawn faction goes, that is going to conclude things for us here. And don't forget, guys, if you enjoyed this content, smash that like button, leave me a comment below on what champions you plan on using with Inquisitor Shamael after seeing this video here. Next, we do have the Undead factions. Skartosis going to be a very strong option with the ability to steal buffs. That's the main thing here. Battle Khazar can work, however, keep in mind that healing your champions with the right head active is going to reduce your max health until you kill that target up to 75%. 75% health may seem okay, but an unlucky crit can one-shot your team, and that would be very unfortunate. So keep that in mind if you plan on using Battle Khazar. Next, we have Mashald, probably one of the stronger champions to use in this lead spot. The trick to his A1 is it's only AoE if enemies are under leech. If you have him in Relentless gear, he's going to be using this A2 all of the time, keeping leech up with 100% uptime here. If you get unlucky, you can steal buffs on top of things. And unfortunately, his aura doesn't apply. However, it does make sense because this champion is incredibly strong. The next champion we have is my personal favorite and one of the best for sure for the Hydra clan boss in the leader aura. We have an attack bonus for all champions in all battles by 33%, which is incredible. We have decreased speed on that A1 ability. We have defense down and weaken potential on the A2, and we have heal reduction, which doesn't really matter. But one key note here, this ability hits extremely hard. So if you're just using the A1 and your A2, make sure you weave in that A3 ability because it does a ton of damage. Outside of that, unfortunately, as far as epics go, we don't have anything for the Undead Hordes. Moving on to Dark Elves now, we have a few great options here. Ray is a fantastic champion, one of the best in my opinion for AoE A1 attacker, not in the leader aura. You could if you wanted to, but I probably wouldn't prefer it. but if you have this champion, do not hesitate to use her. She has defense down on the A1. Yes, she can weak hit, but she's going to be using it so often it doesn't matter. We have an incredibly hard hitting ability for an A2, and on top of that we have an A3, which is like a panic button, just in case any buffs get off on any of the heads. You can remove them with ease if they are removable. The aura isn't going to matter here at all. Moving on to the next champions, Astrolith is interesting. I probably wouldn't recommend her for the lower difficulties, but I'm going to be testing her on Nightmare because if you do know this, the heads have an insane amount of defense. So that means your champions aren't going to be hitting very hard, even if you have full Savage gear, but bombs ignore all defense, so this could in fact be a viable strategy with Astrolith as the leader here. So that's something I'm going to be playing around with for sure, or taking her out of the leader role, putting her in a side spot. She's going to be filling her turn meters. She's going to be really good because she has an A1. Now this is going to be a different type of team than I've already explained in the video. I haven't played around with this too much, but that's going to be left for theory crafting for Nightmare when we unlock it, probably in a few hours from when I'm recording this video. So I do look forward to that. But the idea behind this is going to be boosting the turn meter of all of your allies so they're all getting turns, which means that they're going to have additional benefit outside of their A1 ability. This is definitely more of a whale tactic for sure, if I had to say, because a lot of players are going to have very limited champions to use as it is. We do need 6 champions per team here, then needing 3 teams on top of that. But if you do have the access to many champions, definitely look for a video I'm going to make if this does work out as far as boosting all of your allies' turn meters, making them all faster than the Hydra heads, and in turn getting incredible use out of AoE abilities they have on their A2 as well as their A3 abilities. Moving on from here, none of the other legendaries really stand out as far as the champions you would want to use for a type of team with Inquisitor Shamael in it, really benefiting from the deterrence procs here. Lua, I do know, has an interesting kit. Attacks one enemy, deals 50% of the inflicted damage to all enemies. This attack is critical. You can use her if you do need her as an option. She's not going to be the most optimal, but she will work. Sylar has an AoE A1 ability, decrease accuracy, decrease speed as well. Her aura isn't going to matter, but she's going to be a viable option for you if you do wish to use this champion. Now, one champion I'm not very sure about is going to be Gwyneth here. She is one of the newer champions to the game. She's an AoE, but it says this attack will not trigger counterattacks. So I don't know if this is offensive or if it's applying to your team. If this does apply to your team, that means that, I would hope this is an offensive thing, which means that if she A1s everybody and they have counterattack up, they're not going to counterattack you. However, you never know with the coding. If it works where she uses this and deterrence doesn't proc on your team, that would be terrible and that would defeat the purpose of using a champion like this in the team. If it doesn't, she's going to be a viable option for sure. Now that's going to conclude it for the Dark Elves. Moving on to Night Revenant. Now this is a really important topic. I don't know where this started. I'm not going to accuse anyone of this because I simply don't know. But let's talk about Mother Sybil here. For some reason, I've been seeing people typing in the general Discord, Mother Sybil strat, you need Mother Sybil for this. Mother Sybil is not a very good champion for the strategy with Inquisitor Shamael. Why is that the case? Because she doesn't really do anything. She attacks all enemies, that's great. Decreased speed, also great. Not as good as Suzerain Catan, not as good as a lot of other champions. She fills her own turn meter. Back to my earlier point, you don't care about speed in the main slot. Between Inquisitor Shamael's passive right now, between Relentless gear, none of that matters, so you don't need Mother Sybil at all for this team. I'm not sure where people are getting that from, but trust me, this is probably one of the last champions you would want to use unless it's the only one you have. Then she's going to be a viable option, but not among the best by any means. She also does increase speed of all battles, which once again is going to be a more of a useless stat for this strategy as a whole, unless a separate strat that I have yet to test out is going to be viable in the future here. She does have some pretty cool ability with Revive on Death and increased defense that can help for survivability, but as mentioned before, you don't really take any damage in this kind of strategy here because the heads are not getting turns unless new ones respawn, and even then they're still not getting very many turns. So all in all, she's going to be one of the lower tier champions for this strategy as a whole. Moving on to epics here, Night Revenant has incredible epics. Sinesha, As we all know, she has an A1 that does more damage under 50%. Skull Crown does more damage with enemies above 50%. So both of these champions are among the best champions you can use. If you want to use them in tandem, you can do that as well. For this Inquisitor Shamael strategy of using deterrence and counterattacking all of the time. And as far as Night Revenant goes, that is going to conclude that faction here. Moving on to Dwarfs here, I don't believe Tormund's going to be a viable option for sure. If you have Tormund, I'm not really sure what his multiplier is on this A1 ability here. I don't think it is too high. I could definitely be wrong. If you do have him, you can definitely use him because he is an AoE champion with that A1, so he's going to be using it over and over again. His A3 is also AoE. Block buffs could be nice, but I would build him full damage personally. This A2 ability here is not going to apply because you cannot freeze any of the targets here. And if you wanted to, for some strange reason, to build them with accuracy, you could use this to remove the buffs from a target, then attack them 2 times with this, but I would probably just build him with full damage. He's also going to be a good failsafe with his passive in case something bad happens and you're looking like you're going to wipe. He's going to prevent that for sure. Next, as far as epics go, you can definitely use Geomancer. He has an AoE A1 ability here. I'm not really sure about his A2, A3, or his passive here, because you're not really getting hit a lot in this composition. I do know he's very strong in the clan boss, but the clan boss really gets its value out of your whole team getting hit with Geomancer. So with that not being the case, he's really useful as just that AoE A1 attacking champion. Outside of that, that's going to conclude the Dwarf Epic champions. Moving on to the Shadowkin faction here. Ninja, very strong champion as the lead champion. His A1 is not AoE, which is why you would want him as the leader, but he does have attack 3 times at random here, possibly applying the HP burn. This guy's damage scales incredibly. Now, a lot of people think there's a bug with his A3 here, but if you look at the second part of his skill, when targeting a boss, will only attack the boss, not all enemies, and will ignore 50% of the target's defense. This is going to be good, but the reason why you're not seeing the typical AoE ability is because we do have multiple bosses here. Each Hydra head is going to be considered a boss, with that being the fact, that's why that happens. But what I was really going on to is when fighting bosses will increase Ninja's attack by 20% up to 100, crit damage by 10% up to 25. That's a lot of damage overall and can be insanely valuable for this if you want to use him as his lead champion. It also does have a 15% turn meter against the bosses, helping him cycle through just in case you're struggling on speed, meaning you can only build like 120 or 130 speed. That would be too slow for a difficulty like Brutal, so you'd probably want some extra turn meter for that situation. But outside of that, he's definitely a very good lead champion for that team here. Moving on here, a champion I haven't tested but I do have is going to be Genzin here. He also has lots of turn meter, but as mentioned before, I'm not really sure how this is going to work as far as a viable option until I get to a Nightmare and we start to see very high base stats from all the bosses. Maybe speed will be an issue there for a lot of players, but it's a very end game difficulty to reach, so I think a lot of players aren't going to struggle with this. If you need a hard-hitting defense down champion that's going to cycle quickly, sure, he's going to get a lot of damage out for sure. Also, Relentless Gear once again is going to be the meta stat to have a champion like that in. Moving on to the epic champions, I know Sachi has an AoE A1 ability, so she's going to be good in that supporting role, definitely not the lead role here. And then finally, a champion that I personally used in my team, if I can locate her, is going to be Oboro. Fantastic champion, cannot recommend enough. Void Affinity champion, so no weak hitting, kind of like Ray, defense down ability. All you need is a few debuffs, so you have to kind of plan around that with your composition, making sure you have someone that toxic set, like how I used Inquisitor Shamael. But she hits really hard, she has this awesome ability here, and if you wanted to cycle through to her other abilities, make sure you're careful. Her A3 does apply Perfect Veil. If you do use this ability, you're going to cancel out Inquisitor Shamael's passive, so keep that in mind as well. So Oboro's very good, not in the lead role, but absolutely as a secondary champion. And I believe that's going to conclude it. I don't know all of the Shadowkin epics too well, but I do believe she is the only, or those are the only 2 champions rather, that are AoE. So with that being said, that's going to conclude this video. Which champions are you going to use now that I kind of give you a rundown on every single champion? Who's really good, who's kind of okay, and who's eh? Like I said, Mother Sybil, it was really weird seeing her kind of pop up as the face of this team, as she's one of the worst champions to use. So with that being said, keep in mind as far as who I recommended when I said leader aura, and keep in mind when I said not leader aura. That's going to make a huge difference in your teams. If you want to test things out yourself, I could be wrong. I haven't tested every single champion on this list. I've tested probably 20 or 25 champions here. I'm not sure how many I went over, but I have tested many of them because I do have many of them. So with that being said, I kind of figured out with my own testing, with my own personal team, which one does the best in which role, but that may differ from you based on the difficulty you're fighting and the gear you do have. Alright guys, so that's going to conclude my video here today. Let me know what you guys think. Are you enjoying the Hydra clan boss? Are you kind of bummed that there's one meta champion right now? I mean, I hate saying that, but it is what it is. It's kind of like a Maneater, and even when the normal difficulty came out of the Demon Lord clan boss, it was very hard, even though there's rarely any players that are still around from back then. But give me your thoughts, give me your feedback, and as always, if you enjoy this content, subscribe, smash that like button, and I will see you all in my next upload.